The impact sounded like a bomb going off, metal twisting, glass bursting, a scream of tires skidding across my corner lot. I ran outside and froze. A white BMW, the HOA president's 23-year-old son's pride and joy, sat wrapped around my mailbox, which hadn't moved an inch. Steam billowed, oil streaked across the pavement. Neighbors rushed out with phones raised. Then headlights flashed again, police arriving fast, faces tight, radios crackling. The HOA president stormed toward me, shouting that I'd built a deadly trap, but the sergeant cut her off, staring at the wreck. "Ma'am, but you need to hear this." I didn't meet Evelyn Thornhill, the HOA president, so much as collide with her authority. From the moment I moved into Pine Ridge Estates, she behaved like the neighborhood belonged to her family, and honestly, in her mind, it did. She carried herself like a suburban monarch. Perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect ability to make you feel small with a single raised eyebrow. She never yelled. She didn't need to. Her power came from quiet intimidation. Letters slipped into mailboxes at dawn, polite reminders, and petty fines wrapped in friendly handwriting. But her 23-year-old son, Evan, was the real storm. Where she used rules like a weapon, he used horsepower. That BMW of his was loud enough to shake windows and flashy enough to show everyone exactly how untouchable he felt. Drifting around corners, revving at 2 a.m., tearing up lawns. He acted like our streets were a racetrack built just for him. And every time he did something reckless, his mother's solution was always the same: a dismissive wave, a tight smile, a quiet, "boys will be boys." The first time he clipped my mailbox, she suggested I reconsider its placement for safety. The second time, she implied I'd violated community harmony. By the third, I realized the truth. She wasn't just covering for him. She was enabling him. And together, they'd decided I was the perfect target. If only they knew what that decision was about to cost them. When I bought the corner lot house on Alder Bend, I thought I was choosing peace. After the divorce, I needed a reset, somewhere quiet, predictable, and safe enough for my daughter to bike to school and my son to practice baseball in the yard without dodging traffic. The corner lot felt open, bright, almost hopeful. I imagined weekend grilling, morning coffee on the porch, and the simple comfort of watching the mail truck pull up to the curb. For the first few months, that peace held. My routine was steady: coffee at 6, work orders by 7, home by late afternoon. Packages arrived like clockwork, stacked neatly in the corner mailbox. I'd mow the lawn, chat with a few neighbors, fix a loose board here and there. Life wasn't perfect, but it felt stable, something I'd been craving for years. Then came the first hit. A late Saturday night, I walked out the next morning to find my mailbox leaning at a strange angle, the wooden post cracked and fresh tire marks carved across the grass. At first, I told myself it had to be a delivery driver or a teenager misjudging the turn. So I replaced the post, set it deeper in the soil, and moved on. A week later, it happened again, and again, and again. Every time I repaired it, another late-night burnout or clumsy corner turn destroyed it within days. That's when I started noticing the pattern. The tire marks were the same, the timing the same, and the distant engine roar always sounded like the same car, Evan's white BMW. The kid treated the corner like a stunt course, swinging the back end out just enough to clip whatever stood there. Sometimes he'd knock the mailbox clean off. Other times he'd just graze it like he was warming up for a bigger show. I tried addressing it quietly, mentioned the damage to Evelyn once in passing. She smiled, a perfectly rehearsed, almost sympathetic expression, and said, "Perhaps you should consider a softer material. Wooden posts are so fragile." Translation: "It's your problem, not mine." Neighbors whispered but stayed out of it. No one wanted to cross the Thornhills, and I tried to shrug it off, until packages went missing, until the grass looked like a battlefield, until the repair bills started stacking up. The peace I'd bought this house for was gone, replaced by the constant expectation that at any minute I'd hear the screech of tires and the splintering crack of wood. That was the moment I realized it wasn't an accident, and it wasn't stopping, not unless I did something about it. The pattern started quietly, quiet enough that I almost convinced myself it wasn't deliberate. Every weekend, usually between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., I'd hear the distant growl of Evan's BMW winding through the subdivision. A minute later, the familiar thump echoed across my yard. I'd step outside and find the mailbox leaning, listing to one side like it had been nudged by something large and careless. At first, he didn't destroy it, just tapped it. A little harder each time. The grass near the curb slowly transformed from bright green to a muddy, tire-marked crescent. Whenever I'd catch Evan's car disappearing around the bend, he'd honk twice, mocking, sharp blasts, as if it were some private joke between us. Evelyn pretended not to notice, even when she stood on her porch with her arms crossed, lit by the glow of her decorative lanterns. The message was clear. You can complain, but nothing will happen. And honestly, for a while nothing did. But like every bully I'd ever known, he never stopped at light. The second layer hit harder. One night I walked outside and froze. My entire corner patch looked like the aftermath of a small tornado. Deep tire trenches carved into the soil, grass torn out in patches. Mud splattered onto the sidewalk and halfway up my mailbox post. I checked the camera footage. Evan hadn't simply driven past. He'd driven onto my lawn, circling the corner like he was drifting in a parking lot. His friends hung out the windows, laughing as he tore up the yard I'd spent months restoring. The next morning, instead of apologizing, I found a violation notice taped to my front door. Unmaintained lawn area disrupting community appearance. It was signed by none other than Evelyn Thornhill. I marched down the street to confront her, but she pretended to be confused, said she'd heard complaints from multiple neighbors about my messy corner. That afternoon, she posted on the neighborhood app, some residents refuse to maintain their yards. This impacts property values for everyone. Everyone knew who she meant. No one said a word. The gap between us had officially widened into a war front. By early summer, the hits weren't glancing anymore. They were destructive. One Thursday morning, I stepped outside and froze. My mailbox wasn't just tilted. It was obliterated. The wooden post lay splintered on the pavement, the metal box crushed like an aluminum can. Amazon packages that were supposed to arrive overnight were scattered across the lawn. One soaked, another torn open. A set of custom tools I'd ordered for work? Gone. I repaired it again. And 3 nights later, Evan plowed through it so hard that he uprooted a small decorative tree beside it. The next morning, he breezed past my house with his music blasting, sunglasses on, head turned away like nothing happened. I filed a police report. The officer listened politely, glanced at Evelyn's house, and sighed. "We've had complaints about him before," he admitted quietly. "But unless someone catches him in the act, there's not much we can do." I had caught him, multiple times, but Evelyn always stepped in to shield him. One time, she even claimed Evan had been at home all night, despite the fresh tire marks directly in front of my still-smoking mailbox. The cost of repairs kept climbing. Curbside deliveries stopped because drivers flagged my address as unsafe. And for the first time, I found myself dreading weekends. That was when I stumbled across the comment online, the one about someone replacing PVC with steel pipes, and it sparked an idea I couldn't ignore. A legal one, a safe one, but one Evan absolutely wouldn't see coming. When I finally decided to push back, the HOA pushed harder. A week after I bought materials to repair the mailbox again, I received a certified letter from Evelyn demanding immediate relocation of the mailbox due to traffic hazard concerns. She wanted me to move it back from the curb, which violated USPS code. I called the post office. They confirmed exactly what I suspected. My mailbox was placed exactly where it needed to be, so I held my ground. 2 days later, a police cruiser pulled up. The officer explained someone had called about unsafe mailbox modifications. When he inspected it, he looked almost embarrassed. "It's a regular mailbox," he said. "There's nothing wrong with it." Evelyn wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to muddy the waters, to create a paper trail that made it look like I was the problem. That's when I realized something important. If I didn't build something stronger, something legal but immovable, Evan was going to keep doing this until someone got hurt. So I went back to the hardware store with a new plan. By mid-July, I had my solution. A fully code-compliant mailbox built around a steel core, anchored by concrete deep enough to survive a small hurricane. From the outside, it looked completely normal. Same paint, same style, same mailbox everyone in the neighborhood used. Inside, though, it was an anchor. Tall, solid, and absolutely unmovable. The first time Evan hit it, He must have been going under 10 mph. The BMW's bumper cracked, leaving a fist-sized dent. He backed up, stared at the mailbox, then peeled off in confusion. I knew he'd be back. 3 nights later, Friday, just before midnight, I heard the familiar roar of his engine. I walked quietly to the window. His car swung around the bend, faster than ever, headlights washing over the curb as he lined up his target. This time he hit the mailbox at full speed. The sound was catastrophic, a metallic explosion that echoed down the entire block. The BMW's front end folded like cardboard. The hood buckled. Steam blasted upward. Oil poured onto the pavement in a long, dark streak. The mailbox didn't even tilt. Neighbors poured out onto their porches. Someone screamed. Someone else called 911. Evan stumbled out of the driver's seat, dazed, swaying on his feet. Then Evelyn arrived, sprinting toward the wreck, shrieking at officers, pointing at me like I'd been the one behind the wheel. But when the sergeant saw the skid marks, the damage, the alcohol on Evan's breath, I knew the war was ending. I just didn't know the real twist waiting on the other side of that wreck. 3 days after the crash, the HOA held an emergency community meeting. Everyone knew what that meant. Evelyn was going to try to spin the narrative before the truth buried her. The community center was packed, standing room only. Neighbors who usually avoided HOA drama showed up early just to get seats. Reporters waited outside. Even the police sergeant from the crash stood in the back, arms crossed, observing. Evelyn entered like a politician facing a scandal, back straight, jaw tight, dressed in black like she was the victim. Evan wasn't there, of course. He was still dealing with the DUI charges and whatever conversations the police had with him afterward. She slammed her folder onto the podium. "This meeting," she announced, "is to address the dangerous, weaponized mailbox constructed by Mr. Dawson." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but rage. People whispered. Some rolled their eyes. A few looked at me with quiet sympathy. I stood, hands in my pockets, heart steady. I'd been waiting for this. She continued, pointing toward me. "His modifications were reckless, illegal, and directly caused my son's injuries." The sergeant cleared his throat loudly. "That's not exactly how we determined it, ma'am." The room shifted. Eyes turned. My moment had finally arrived. I walked to the front, carrying a simple manila folder. Nothing dramatic, just the truth. "Before this gets twisted further," I said, "here's what actually happened." I played the first video. Evan drifting onto my lawn 3 weeks earlier, tearing trenches across the grass. Gasps. Then the second. Him clipping the mailbox deliberately, laughing with his friends. Murmurs. Then the crash footage. The BMW barreling down the street at high speed before slamming into the post he thought would crumble like all the others. Silence. I laid out printed copies of the county regulations. Mailbox placement must be exactly at the curb, not behind it, not beside it, at the curb. And reinforcement is allowed as long as the design meets federal dimensions. This one does. I pointed to a highlighted section from USPS guidelines. Posts may be constructed using metal, wood, or composite materials, and may be anchored for stability. Nothing illegal, nothing unsafe, nothing hidden. The sergeant stepped forward. We confirmed excessive speed, alcohol involvement, and prior documented complaints about reckless driving. The mailbox did not violate any local or federal codes. Neighbors began whispering among themselves. Now not about me, but about her. Someone spoke up from the back. "Evelyn, you knew your son was doing this. You ignored every complaint." Another added, "You fined him for damage your son caused? Seriously?" Evelyn's face drained of color. She wasn't losing control of the meeting. She'd already lost it. Evelyn tried to speak, but the sergeant stepped forward again, holding a small binder. "Before you continue, ma'am, we have paperwork to serve." Her eyes widened. "This is harassment. I will not—" He didn't flinch. "Your son faces charges for DUI, reckless endangerment, and property damage, but there's more." He opened the binder. Multiple residents filed reports about selective enforcement, ignored complaints, and retaliation. We cross-referenced timestamps with your HOA communications. The room buzzed. "And after reviewing video evidence, your misuse of authority, attempts to interfere with reports, and threats toward residents. The county has opened an investigation into your conduct as HOA president." Evelyn staggered back as if someone punched her. "This is ridiculous. I have done nothing wrong." Her voice cracked. Neighbors stared, not with fear, but with long overdue honesty. The treasurer stood. I moved to suspend Evelyn Thornhill from the HOA board pending investigation. Seconded, said another. All in favor? A sea of hands rose. Evelyn yelled something incoherent about conspiracies, but no one listened. Even the board attorney quietly gathered his paperwork and walked away from her. As the sergeant escorted her outside to discuss official statements, she shot me a look, half fury, half disbelief. For years, she'd ruled through intimidation. But in that moment, stripped of her authority, reduced to just another resident facing consequences, she realized the truth. Her power had finally met something stronger. The community she thought she controlled. When the meeting finally emptied, I stood outside the community center under the streetlights, letting the cool night air settle the adrenaline that had been humming through me for weeks. For the first time since buying the corner lot, the neighborhood felt calm, not quiet. People were still buzzing around me, talking, asking questions, apologizing for staying silent so long, but emotionally calm. Like pressure had finally released. Neighbors I barely knew came up to shake my hand. About time someone stood up to her. "I'm sorry we let it get this far. You did the right thing, man." Their voices blended into a comforting background hum, the opposite of the isolation I'd felt every time Evelyn slipped a violation notice into my mailbox. Even the people who once avoided eye contact now treated me like someone who'd carried a weight for all of them. That night, when I got home, my kids were waiting on the front steps. My daughter hugged me so hard I nearly lost my balance. "You're not in trouble, right?" she asked. "No," I said, smiling. "Not anymore." My son pointed proudly at our reinforced mailbox, standing tall at the corner like a soldier guarding the yard. "That thing's a tank," he said. "Everyone at school's talking about it." For the first time in months, I laughed. Really laughed. Maybe it wasn't the mailbox that felt solid. Maybe it was me. The fallout came quickly. Within a week, the HOA board announced Evelyn's full removal from her position, citing misconduct, retaliation, and gross misuse of authority. The county opened an ethics review into her leadership history, and a civil investigation followed after residents finally felt safe enough to file complaints. Evan faced his own consequences. The DUI stuck. So did the reckless endangerment charge. His license was suspended, and the BMW, towed away from my intersection with a sad metallic groan, became an expensive monument to bad decisions. Insurance didn't cover the damages. Too much evidence. Too many reports. Too many lies. Their attorney reached out quietly, practically whispering through the phone, asking if I'd consider a civil resolution. I agreed on one condition. The settlement had to be written into the HOA records so everyone knew the truth. In the end, I received compensation for all the mailbox repairs, lawn restoration, camera upgrades, and the stress they'd put my family through. But the money wasn't the victory. The victory was that everything they'd tried to hide was finally on paper, official and undeniable. With Evelyn gone, the HOA didn't collapse. It transformed. Patricia, the treasurer, stepped up as interim president. Meetings became transparent. Budgets were published. Fines were reviewed fairly. Complaints weren't funneled through one woman's personal agenda anymore. For the first time, Pine Ridge Estates actually felt like a community instead of a kingdom. A month later, I stood on my corner again, coffee in hand, watching the first delivery truck since spring pull up. The driver leaned out the window, smiling. "Looks safe again," he said, dropping the package into the mailbox. "Well," I replied, tapping the steel core beneath the surface, "it's definitely sturdy." News spread fast about the changes in the neighborhood. Someone even suggested holding a neighborhood BBQ on the common lawn, a real one, not the forced gatherings Evelyn used to organize where everyone pretended to enjoy themselves. At the first meeting under the new board, someone asked if we should replace my heavy-duty mailbox with a standard one to match the others. Before I could respond, half the room spoke at once. "Leave it. It's tradition now. It's the safest corner in the whole neighborhood." My son leaned over and whispered, "Dad, your mailbox has more fans than my favorite YouTuber." Life returned to normal, but a better normal. Quieter nights. No engine revving, no tire trenches, no fear of walking outside to find another smashed post. Sometimes I walk past the mailbox and run my hand along the metal, remembering all the nights I stood there angry, exhausted, ready to give up. And every time I think the same thing. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about a mailbox. It was about the moment a bully, two bullies really, finally hit something that didn't break. A few weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that Evelyn had put her house on the market. She couldn't stand living in a neighborhood that no longer bowed to her. Evan moved out first, reportedly driving an old used sedan instead of a BMW. Something poetic about that. Sometimes life gives lessons gently. Sometimes it sends them at full speed into a steel-reinforced post. As I sat on my porch one evening, golden sunset spilling across the street, I realized something. For the first time since moving here, the corner lot finally felt like home. And this time, nothing, and no one, was strong enough to knock it down.